All right, so what Wade's doing here is he's going to go ahead and loosen and or remove the static spin screws. You don't have to remove them, just if you're questioning it, just go ahead and remove them because no harm can come of that, just don't lose them. In order to fit this base in there. You can see the notches on the base here, and that's going to come into play later.
Line up the X's.
Yeah, so the notches are what the X's line up, and that's true since 2010. And so when you're installing it, go ahead and try to get the X's to line up with those screws. And then any screws on an X pole, with the exception of X joints, which this single piece doesn't have, whenever you're tightening them, you finger tighten and then you just wiggle rotationally as you finger tighten. Now this guy's loose, as you can see, it's pivoting around, it's like it's designed. So his wiggle's not as effective right now. Once he gets the pole up and there's weight on it, then it can be much more effective.
You need to back these screws out too.
Yep. Or remove. So the reason why he backed out those screws is so that when he goes to put it up, all he has to do is twist in the right direction to adjust the height. I'm just going to go ahead and set that there for now. This thing's pretty freaking heavy. Because remember, it's competition grade and it's single piece. So he's just lining up the top adapter with that spherical bearing, which is actually one of the hardest things to do in the world. It may as well be a carnival game. Because yes, the spherical bearing will move, but until you have the top adapter in there, you have to line that thing up perfectly perpendicular. I'm letting you do all of it, dude. This is fun slash fun. There. Damn, he got it on the third try. That was awesome. And then he lines it up with the hole in the floor, and just sort of drops right in. And as of right now, this pole's not going to fall down on its own, but I know better than do anything on the pole, because it's not even height adjusted. So now he's already got these three loosened. He's going to do the normal thing that we all know since 2010 and tighten it. Now, the taller the pole and the more malleable the floor or the less rigid the ceiling. It's basically when you start to pressurize the pole against the floor and the ceiling. If the ceiling's allowed to move at all, like it's not very rigid, or if the floor is soft enough that it can press down, then for safety's sake, you're going to want to go tighter than you normally would. And the way that you can tell that you're tight enough is that if you're guys like us and you're using two hands, and then you can just switch to one hand and keep going, if you can still move with one hand, you might not be tight enough yet. And it's better to start off too tight and then put it on spin mode and find out, oh, that spins horribly, let's go down 2 rotations. But he's done this before. He's gonna guess work. So now he's doing the part where he lines up the any of the screws with that red line. The 2014 camera? Yeah, the 2014 and newer models have this little channel right here that gives you a peak on this red line. But as I pointed out earlier, is you can use that and it's a good guide. There's only one red line and there's 3 keyholes. And those keyholes line up with the screws. So if you have a pre-2014 model, it won't have this keyhole here and it won't have the red line. So you would take this sheath off to line up these 3 adjuster screws with the flat part of the thread. And while he's finger tightening this guy, he's also rotationally wiggling this thing. And one thing that can be deceiving when he's doing that is these static screws down here that he did as well as he could when the pole didn't have weight on it, but now it's got weight on it. He can go ahead and get those nice and perfect, and you can see that the wiggle is already gone. So before you try to tighten these guys, make sure that there's absolutely no wiggle allowed in these guys. And once you get it finger tight, you should finger tight like all of them in a series before you put any pressure behind it, just to make sure you got it lined up perfectly. And then, believe it or not, once you get them all finger tight, the only pressure you need is like 1 more degree of rotation, because these screws aren't holding any load. You just want them to not move on their own. So he's putting only a little bit of pressure beyond what the tightness would be. I see people like try to tighten them as tight as they can. Not only is there no benefit to that, but you are going to strip the hex head of the screw, or you're going to strip the hex key, or you're going to put too much undue force on the threads on the inside, and then you're going to be wondering why you can't get that screw back out without stripping the screw anyway. So one of the most common things I see is people tightening it too tight. So now that he's